Hi everyone, hope you're well. Thank you so much for joining us for our Kumi Now online session. Thank you also to the people I know in the US and Canada. The time zone changed in Palestine and Europe and other parts of the world. So I think in the US, you guys are not changing it until I think November 2nd. So it will be back to normal next week, but I know some people had to wait an hour for the session or an hour later. So just want to thank you for your patience for this. Today we're excited to welcome Dalia Kumsiye. I think she's in the room with us now. I don't know if Dalia, if you can hear us.
Hello?
Oh yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. So I'll introduce you first, and then maybe we can have about like 30 minutes, 40 minutes for your discussion, and then a potential Q&A if we have some time. So does that sound good? Okay, awesome. And do you need to share your screen during the presentation? Okay, awesome. So everyone, this is Dalia Kumsiye. She's taking the time to speak to us today, so thank you so much, Dalia. Dalia is a human rights lawyer specializing in legal human rights advocacy, and she's the founder and director of the Balasan Initiative for Human Rights in Palestine. So she'll talk a little bit about Balasan, maybe some of your background if you want, and then our presentation today will be focused a little bit on Bethlehem updates and issues in Bethlehem. So, Dalia, thank you so much again for joining us, and we look forward to hearing you speak.
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting me. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having invited me to speak about what's going on in Bethlehem nowadays, or rather to ring the alarm bells, not really speak, um, unfortunately. Um, Allow me to very briefly introduce Balasan and then we can start. Balasan is an independent human rights organization established in Bethlehem. The word itself, Balasan, is a name of a tree, an indigenous tree that has existed in Palestine for thousands of years. We find reference for this name in the Holy Bible. And really, with the name, we wanted to reflect our connection to the land, both as Palestinians and as Christians. And we have this philosophy that, we still use the leaves of the balasan tree to cure some illnesses in our traditional medicine. So the philosophy is with whatever work that we're doing, we seek to remedy the injustices that are ongoing in our beloved homeland, Palestine. And we kept the name initiative because we do think of ourselves as eventually initiatives. We don't like the egos of big organizations. We also refuse to specialize in specific violations. So we work on a variety of issues where is needed. Our work is mainly about collecting the data, applying policy and legal analysis, studying the impacts and consequences of these policies comprehensively, but always shedding light on Palestinian Christian components as not only religious components, but also as valuable national components, especially for Palestinian Christians that are truly, I don't want to say, well, I can easily say that our presence is basically that fragmented to the point where we fear that any meaningful presence will go extinct in the our ancestral land of Palestine. So with that, the Balasan was found, and then I forgot to say we make recommendations to decision makers and engage in legal advocacy as such. Um, this is just very briefly Balasan, and I prefer to start speaking about Bethlehem now because honestly, I do realize the time constraint will not allow us to really explain everything that's going on in Bethlehem. And it's a neglected governorate, I want to say. Unfortunately, a lot is going on. I'll try to address briefly everything. But also, for reference, we have our website, balasan.org, where many more material and detailed updates can be found, and reports, actually. So with that, I would say that the timing of this briefing actually sounds great. Soon enough, the world will start Christmas preparation, enjoying the season and the holidays, but without much thought to what is going on in the city of Christmas itself, basically the birthplace of Jesus. Now, let me preface this by clarifying why we're trying to shed light on Bethlehem. First of all, Bethlehem is a governorate in the occupied West Bank and part of the occupied Palestinian territory, of course. So all the Israeli policies that apply in the West Bank are also applicable in Bethlehem, even more so. But still, Bethlehem has its own characteristics in the fact that it holds a key importance in the Christian faith as the birthplace of Jesus Christ. It is also strategically located in proximity to Jerusalem, and as such is considered by Israel as part of what they refer to as Greater Jerusalem. Moreover, Bethlehem is currently home to the biggest remaining Palestinian Christian population, and Israeli policies have a direct impact on their very presence in their ancestral homeland. But if we talk about Bethlehem comprehensively, we are mainly addressing a few key points. The first one is annexation modalities that have accelerated in the governorate. The second one is the increased use of settler and army violence as tools of forcible displacement. And then we are talking about movement restrictions, and then the de-development and impoverishment policies. Now, when it comes to the annexation modalities, Israeli annexation objectives in the West Bank overall are as old as the occupation itself, basically. We might think that there is a new shift towards annexation, but in reality, Israel has indeed been laying the foundations for annexation for decades in the West Bank. Mainly seen through establishing, expanding, and then connecting settlements, land confiscation, active forcible displacement, whether directly the actual use of force, and then indirectly by the creation of, or the deliberate creation of a coercive environment that drives people to leave. So while annexation objectives are not a novelty in the Israeli policymaking and objectives, their intensification at this scale is. And we can reference that to post October the 7th. Again, while we always say this, it's a fallacy to think that the deterioration in the West Bank is a result of October the 7th. It is, I mean, in fact, no new policy has been introduced after October the 7th. However, the deterioration of the scale and the number of violations is the novelty. So post October the 7th, there have been, or we have alerted against serious steps that were taken towards annexation. Mainly, the main feature of them is through shifting the nature of the governance of the West Bank. Now, usually this is occupied territory and it was run through the Israeli military as the occupying power. What we have witnessed post-October the 7th is a shift from the Israeli military occupation to the West Bank being run by the Israeli government, i.e. extending their jurisdiction directly into occupied territory is what we call annexation. In both forms, be it de facto or de jure, it is illegal under international law. And then not only that, we have seen the extension of Israeli jurisdiction into areas A and B, not only area C, which is, around 62% of the occupied Palestinian territory, where Israel exercises its exclusive control as one of the main outcomes of the Oslo process. Post-October the 7th, we have seen direct Israeli jurisdiction being exercised into areas A and B, including demolition orders in these areas. Another alarming development is the acceleration of land confiscation and settlement expansion, which has accelerated in all of the West Bank since this government took office in 2022. We have seen around 25,000 dunams being confiscated. But if we look at Bethlehem, it is a true problem, and the cumulative effect has reduced Bethlehem 10% from its original territory, which has been allocated for settlements. And the settlement grows, their economic hinterland, if you want, and buffer zones were expanded at the expense of the lands in Bethlehem, labeled again as occupied territories. Also, another very alarming development is Israel's initiation of the land registration process in Area C, which seeks to make the land ownership in occupied territory as definitive. Of course, this is very illegal under international law, and occupying power cannot alter the land ownerships. This has accompanied a bill at the Israeli Knesset that allows Israelis individuals to basically directly purchase land in the occupied territory, which is very problematic as well and is very illegal. If we talk about settlement expansions and retroactive authorizations as well, in the Bethlehem area, we're talking about large settlement block, what the Israelis call as settlements block, which is basically the lands falling between two Israeli settlements that should unite the Israeli settlements and be part of them. In Bethlehem, we have the Gush Etzion block, and it is located towards the west of Bethlehem, and it's being significantly expanded. Also, as a punishment for some European states who recognized the state of Palestine last year, Israel established a new settlement in Bethlehem, built on a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's called the Nahal Heletz, in the vicinity of Al Makhrur area in Batir. It also expands to incorporate, more lands, but it will cut Palestinian farmers off of their lands. There are also plans to build almost 1,000 new homes in the settlement of Efrat, south of Bethlehem, and also in Gush Etzion. These have been announced as plans so far. We're also talking about settler violence and army violence, which should not be perceived as mere extremist individuals wreaking havoc in the OPT, as normally they are reported in the news. It is rather state-sponsored, and it is very well documented how settler violence and terror is practiced under the protection and even accompanied of Israeli forces. One alarming trend that we have witnessed post-October the 7th is the blurring line between who is the settler and who is the soldier. When we collect testimonies from the field, usually the victim, the Palestinian victim, cannot identify who the perpetrator was, because it is a settler, and then the settler goes in, wears army clothes, and then it's a soldier, which makes the accountability process even more complicated and impossible to pursue as a Palestinian. Now, the settler violence was already problematic before October the 7th. And I remember we marked the year 2023 as a record year in a number of human rights violations, including settler violence. But in the era post the genocide in Gaza and seizing the world's attention that was rightfully focused on Gaza, of course, Israel has created around 800 new settler militias, in addition to the already existing 87 settler militias, which means settler armed groups. And they have been established and armed under the directives of the right-wing minister Ben Gvir, who not only relaxed the gun regulations, but also gave 150,000 free weapons to the settlers. Now, the result of this, and as such, settler attacks have skyrocketed. Since October the 7th, 2023, over 7,154 settler attacks have been documented against Palestinians and their property, resulting in 33 murders so far. In Bethlehem, settler violence is actively being used as a tool of forcible displacement, especially in the southern and eastern parts. In the eastern parts, I think it's not being properly addressed, and I spoke about how Israel is directly giving itself jurisdiction into areas A and B. Now, with two military orders, Israel has, in fact, de facto annexed the main parts of the eastern parts of Bethlehem, areas B, one that gave it direct jurisdiction and authority instead of the Palestinian Authority, and the other gave it enforcement jurisdiction, especially for demolitions, which allows it to basically demolish houses and homes retroactively since 1989, so since the Wye River Agreement. This is in practice very, very problematic because it's accompanied by heavy settler violence in the area, and settlers literally taking over the lands, and literally we documented one case of killing, plus the property damage and what have you. So we're talking about large parts of the governorate that have been not only de facto annexed, but where also forcible displacement policies are very well acted. It is olive harvest season in Palestine, as you know, and only in 1 week, Israeli settlers mounted at least 71 attacks between 7th and 10th of October 2025, and in 27 Palestinian villages, resulting in 1 Palestinian being murdered, 99 Palestinians being injured, and more than 27 olive trees being destroyed. That's only in 1 week. These attacks are occurring during, again, the most crucial agricultural period in the year, reflecting a systematic pattern of intimidation that aims to force Palestinians to abandon their lands, basically. And again, the olive trees are not, only olive trees sacred culturally. They are a vital economic and cultural lifeline for thousands of Palestinian families across the West Bank. In one of our recent updates, also speaking about the olive harvest season, we spoke about it's not really new, but the accelerated trend of Israeli settlers really not only blocking the access of the Palestinian farmers to their land, but also stealing the harvest itself. So not only do Palestinians, not only are they prevented from accessing, even when they can access, they will find their olive trees empty. The olives had already been picked and stolen. So this has basically destroyed the rural economy. When we talk about movement restrictions, Bethlehem has the highest movement restrictions across all of the Palestinian governorates. Among many other violations, as you know, Israel has escalated movement restrictions across the West Bank after its military aggression on Gaza. But already before that, movement restrictions were scattered across the West Bank, controlling the entrances and exits to Palestinian cities all across. But after October the 7th, Israel has implemented additional movement restrictions that further dissect the West Bank, entrenching them to block movement within the same Palestinian cities and even towns, like in Beit Sahur, where I live. Now, the numbers indicate that nowadays there are at least 900 movement restrictions. The number will vary between one source and the other because how each organization identifies movement restrictions differs and the criteria. But that's why we say at least 900. They could be more. And in fact, every day there are new restrictions that are being implemented. In Bethlehem, for example, we have documented that only in September in this year's, at least 6 new additional movement restrictions were installed. Some of them blocking access to key areas and services, like, for example, a main hospital in Beit Jala and schools across the governorate. Now, usually movement restrictions are addressed from the point of freedom of movement, which is a right, a fundamental human right. But what is not sufficiently addressed is the role of the checkpoints in creating a very coercive environment and disrupting life and access to fundamental rights, extending beyond the ability to move in freedom and dignity and safety from one place to another. For instance, our ability to access our education, healthcare, holy sites, family rights, workplace. Everything depends on your ability to move. But also another thing that's not properly addressed is how crossing a checkpoint is an incredibly stressful and humiliating process. Checkpoints are places where Palestinians are assaulted, inspected, humiliated without any accountability, sometimes even killed. And I don't exaggerate when I say crossing a checkpoint is a life-risking experience at this point. And this all, we see it, we experience it, and this has a huge psychological toll on us as we cross the checkpoints. Violence at the checkpoints post the era of October 7th has literally skyrocketed, and the assaults at checkpoints across the West Bank are daily. I would like to refer to a report that we are currently finalizing and about to publish on the violence against Palestinian women at the Israeli checkpoints, targeting women in specific, and what it does to them physically and psychologically. It will be on our website in the coming 2 weeks. And we're also working on a movie that documents this. We already published a report on, how checkpoints are being used as a tool of control and subjugation. And now this other testimony report is really examining the impacts on Palestinian women. We called it the silent war on Palestinian women, the diaries of the checkpoints. But we can't talk about Bethlehem without talking about the development and impoverishment policies, actually. Now, with regards to Bethlehem's geographic makeup, more than 85% of the Bethlehem governorate is made up of Area C. 85% of Bethlehem is made of Area C. Area C should automatically mean for you, exclusive Israeli control, where Palestinians cannot build, develop, even be present, where house demolition policies are increasing for the purpose of establishing, forcing Palestinians or expelling Palestinians, where there's a lot of settler violence and terror. So this is basically Area C. It's an area where Palestinians can hardly be present. And only 1% is zoned for Palestinian development in this area, in Bethlehem. Of the rest of the land, there is 38% designated as firing zone, 34% as natural reserves, and it's a tricky Israeli term to basically prevent Palestinians from accessing these areas and controlling them. And then we have 12% as settlements. The part of Bethlehem adjacent to the Dead Sea is closed for exploitation for tourism, mining, and other activities. And this is the part that has mainly been annexed with the two military orders that I spoke about. When it comes to the annexation wall, 52 kilometers of it run through Bethlehem, designating a large area of the governorate as part of a seam zone, because the annexation wall is not just the structure itself, it comes with a buffer or a seam zone where also Palestinians cannot be present or build, or it's criminally liable if they do. Now, among Bethlehem's population, it has the second largest number of inhabitants living in Area C in the West Bank, following Hebron. The economic and social difficulties faced, of course, in Area C, just in Bethlehem as elsewhere, it is basically the governorate with the highest level of unemployment in Palestine. With regard to property rights, we have 18% in Bethlehem of all demolition orders allocated for the Bethlehem governorate, Israeli demolition orders, of course. Now, Bethlehem is one of the areas of Palestine with the highest concentration of Palestinian Christians, especially in the Bethlehem city, Beit Jala, and Beit Sahur, where Palestinian Christian communities largely rely on tourism or operate small, like artisan craft stores from olive woods, selling them to pilgrims and visitors to the Nativity Church and other Christian sites in the surrounding areas. But due to the pandemic and following the war on Gaza and the genocide, tourism was almost entirely suspended, and the losses in Bethlehem have been drastic because every other sector relies mainly on tourism to move the wheel of economy. Now, by June 2025, unemployment has risen to 31%. And Bethlehem was losing approximately $2.5 million in tourism revenue. We spoke about the annexation wall, but it being used to cut off Christian farming families from their land, leading to serious difficulties and in its continued cultivation. But also, the estimates place the amount of land annexed in Bethlehem as a result of the annexation wall's construction at about 22,000 dunams. Post-October the 7th, now farmers need permits issued by the Israeli military when granted that allow them to limited access for their land and for limited periods. This olive harvest season, the case has worsened. Basically, less permits are available. People are unable to access their lands. So the annexation wall not only cut off Palestinian farmers, including Palestinian Christians, from their land, and it does not only mean the loss of livelihoods, it also means the loss of their past connection to the land and the future one. So it does urge them to leave, but it also blocked the main road, this annexation wall, between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, severing their connection with their holy site and the much larger Christian communities in Jerusalem, resulting in the communities being isolated one from the other. Now, in the Christian faith, Bethlehem represents nativity and Jerusalem represents resurrection, the two main founding pillars of the Christian faith that have never been physically isolated, both administratively and, again, physically, until the Israeli occupation for the first time in history. The wall's construction also threatens not only Palestinian Christian communities, for example, in the Kremizan area, but also Christian traditions that have existed for, that are centuries old, basically. In the Kremizan area, it's also part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, very, rich with the ecosystem. I am not an ecologist, but amazing Palestinian ecologists have written about the Kremizan and Al-Mahrur valleys and their, indispensable value when it comes to the ecology. And the annexation wall there and the settlements and the annexation of Al-Makhrour Valley will result in drastic consequences in terms of ecology and fauna and flora. So we're talking about in these areas alone. In the Kremizan area, we have lands that belong to two Catholic orders, religious orders, a monastery that was ancient, that was established on the ruins of an ancient monastery, and a convent that operates as a school, as well as lands belonging to 58 Palestinian Christian families. And in Al-Makhrour, we are talking about ownership that belongs to Palestinian Christians with a percentage of 91% of Al-Makhrour Valley. So here the impacts of annexing these areas would be drastic on the Palestinian Christian community, on the West Bank for their huge potential in development, for their huge significance and importance in ecology, but also for humanity because both of them are parts of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, taken as a whole, when considering the strangled economy that Palestinian Christians in Bethlehem are born into, the high rates of unemployment that they're facing, the continued destruction, the confiscation, the annexation, the increasing community isolation, the worsening circumstances in the future in such a political setting where dignity is absent, security is absent, where there are no guarantees, no hopes that tomorrow will be a better day. I think this has truly drastic impacts on the last remaining Palestinian Christian presence in the Bethlehem area. And sadly, given the small and shrinking size, the Palestinian Christian community is truly facing an existential threat as a result. And we have also issued an urgent appeal to the UN special procedures where we addressed 5 special rapporteurs and the community of investigations, saying that with the Israeli policies and practices on both sides of the Green Line, Israel is basically bringing the last remaining Palestinian Christian presence to the brink of going extinct. And as such, the case of Bethlehem allows a deeper look at the challenges that face Palestinian Christians to see how obstacles to their economic, social, and cultural and human rights self-actualization can lead to increased levels of immigration. I'm always careful with the word immigration because it's really a result of a coercive environment where they lack the genuine choice to leave, if you will. So if we are to talk about the impacts, the Israeli occupation has significantly reshaped the demographics of Bethlehem. Such policies resulted in the deliberate creation of this coercive environment that I was explaining, where fundamental rights are violated, no dignity, no freedom, of course. And Christians have, as a result, immigrated in large numbers, especially after October the 7th, in search of lives and livelihoods not burdened by oppression, violence, dispossession. So we can say that Christians have declined from 85% of the population of the region in 1947 to 10% in 2017. That's in Bethlehem. And we're counting with statistics the numbers of violations and their scale, but some things cannot be counted, like they cannot be really tracked in numbers. For Christians, there's a deep spiritual relationship between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Again, the pillars of or the cities that represent the pillars of the Christian faith. So their physical and administrative separation is truly something that's drastic. It's very much, it has harmed the social and religious fabrics of the Palestinian society. Not to mention that these restrictions have also, before October the 7th, severely affected the tourism in this region. And contributed, negatively to a worsening situation economically for the local communities. Now, if we are to talk about the legality of the Israeli policies and measures, I think I tried to very briefly mention the main features of what's been going on. Again, it's hard to detail, everything. Even it's hard for us who are focused on Bethlehem to keep track of everything that's going on a daily basis, because there's a lot that's going on a daily basis. We are unable to keep track of, the Israeli occupations, policies, and practices in the area. But every single policy that I mentioned, in and by itself, as well as all of them combined and multi-layered, are illegal under both international humanitarian law and international human rights law. I don't want to go into depth with any legal analysis, but if we look at the objectives of these policies, be it forcible displacement of Palestinian and annexation of the Palestinian lands, these are very grave breaches under international law. Annexation is a red line. It cannot be permitted. It is illegal without any derogations permitted. And when it comes to forcible displacement, it can mount up to a war crime. Now, in July of last year, the International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion, and I always like to highlight the name, Legal Consequences of Israel's Policies and Practices in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. And the findings were clear that the very presence of Israel inside the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful, the words of the court. And it placed a lot of weight on the responsibility of third states and the international community to bring this unlawful presence of Israel in the OPT to an end, in line with international law and according to its rules. What does that really mean? International law offers a big list of options that states must legally act upon. It's a legal obligation for them to do that, i.e. sanctions, to bring a violation and grave breaches of international law to an end. And when we talk about Israel's violations, they are systematic, which means they all take place as parts of system. They're not one-off incidents in several. Like the system is designed to produce this kind of outcome for Palestinians only, which are the systematic violations. And B, they are very well documented. And we cannot document all of them, mind you. So we're documented. It's very well documented. And what we document is overwhelming evidence for establishing that, annexation, forcible displacement, apartheid, all of these genocide, all of these terminology that we are using are legal terminology. It has standards and definitions, and not only are they met, they are oftentimes exceeded by Israel. So with that, I don't think any serious legal scholarship will argue about the legality of Israeli practices inside the occupied Palestinian territory. The question now is, how can we as communities pressure member states to act? This is a time of action. It's not a time to pray unless the prayer is accompanied by action. It's not a time to issue a statement unless the statement is really in line with strategic action. This is a time for action, action, action. What does action look like? We are talking about sanctions, basically, targeted measures, political, diplomatic, and economic sanctions, downgrading of downgrading of relations. We are talking about, for example, suspending free trade agreements, arms embargoes. There's a long list that states can offer or should, again, they should offer and act upon. Our role here is to think how, in the limited time and resources that we have, we can pressure states to take this kind of action. And Israel's genocide and actions in Gaza are not Israel's alone. There's a long list of states that have been complicit, enabled, supported financially, politically, in strategic military terms. By not taking action, this is also complicity. The international media is also complicit. And there will be a time of reckoning for all of these atrocious, atrocious violations that have been allowed to take place and expand, specifically because there's this culture of impunity, because states until this point never fulfilled their legal and moral obligation. I don't like to say moral. States don't operate upon morality. We're talking about legal obligations under international law. And I think if the logic of power is what's going to be reigning, is what's going to be governing our world, I think this is bad news for all of us, not only for Palestinians. So with that, I would like to conclude, perhaps to allow some time for the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dalia, for this very insightful and informative presentation. Last week we did a presentation on the E1 plan, so it was more of a focus on Jerusalem and how the West Bank and Jerusalem are being cut off. And so I think having this focus on Bethlehem was really good, and it kind of gave us a lot of continuity with kind of thinking through annexation and international law. So if anyone has questions, please put it in the chat and I'll make sure to relay. I see a few questions. I'll just try to before Jake, you can speak, but I'll read out some of the questions first. So the first one, someone was asking, I know recently the Knesset made kind of the symbolic measure to approve annexation kind of during a visit from US officials, and then the US administration basically was like, oh, we're against annexation, we're not going to allow this to happen. What is the reaction from Palestinians on these, statements from the US? I know this has happened in the past where they say this. So what is your reaction to their statements, what you think will happen? So yeah.
Well, I don't think we give a lot of weight to statements nowadays because, we look at what's going on the ground. We're barely able, as I said, to keep track with what's going on on the ground. And we've been alerting the world long before this Knesset vote, because before this was voted in the Knesset, this is being implemented on the ground. Everyone thinks of annexation as a decision to be made and then it will happen, when the reality of the matter is annexation is a series of, small or no longer small, but gradual decisions at the administrative and structural level within the Israeli government that shift the nature of its government of the West Bank, expand its jurisdiction, replace any Palestinian sovereignty, no matter how small it was before, to basically establish an exclusive Israeli control in the OPT. And this is what we are witnessing. In fact, this is what is going on the ground. Now, whether the Americans say they support that or not, what are you doing to stop it? This is the question. And again, we also have to be updated with how the Palestinians are now perceiving the US. It is no longer a biased third party. It is literally complicit with Israel. So I don't think, we give any weight to what the US is saying. We look at what it's doing.
Thank you, Dalia. Jake, why don't you ask your question now?
Thank you. My question is, first of all, to say that what Dalia says, tremendous information. We know part of it, if not all of it. We know that there are a million methods that Israel devised to take over West Bank, because this is the aim, to take over West Bank. So everything else is toward that. Now, in regard to the Palestinian Authority and Abu Mazen, they're sitting there, living the high life for decades and basically collaborating with Israel all the way. So the question is to Dalia, how come there is no revolt against the Palestinian Authority, even if it has to be somewhat violent, because there's no other way? Is it because if there is any resistance, Israel will immediately arrest those people and kill them and so on, just to protect Abu Mazen, because for them it's good? Is that the reason? How come there is no revolt?
Yes, so I think we are dealing a lot with questions about the Palestinian Authority, what their role is, what they're doing, especially after the genocide in Gaza and the immediate heavy militarization, if you want, of the West Bank. And, I am saddened to say that their role is quite irrelevant. Like, we are often in Area C, these are the most targeted areas. And when we go there to document and collect testimonies, we are, witnessing grave violations. We're talking about sometimes war crimes in Area C that are taking part on a daily basis. And when we go there, the people don't even make any reference to the Palestinian Authority. It cannot protect its people. It is not like no one is sitting around and waiting what the Palestinian Authority will say about a certain topic nowadays. Unfortunately, they have become even a lot more irrelevant and weakened. And I think this is part of an Israeli policy to sideline entirely the Palestinian Authority and just, ignore, like some of the Israeli ministers say, they want to destroy the Palestinian Authority. In reality, when it comes to the dynamics of the daily life, we are not in touch, with the Palestinian Authority. They have no actual power in, dictating life in the West Bank, at least. If you look, for example, if you're monitoring the news, you will see that increasingly, and only in Bethlehem, we have just published an update today. Across the West Bank and in Bethlehem, there has been an increased incursion of the Israeli army inside Palestinian cities and villages. And where is the Palestinian Authority? People even stopped asking this question. I don't think, they are perceived as the main actor in the current dynamics, at least.
So how come there's no revolt? They don't have the power to revolt?
Because, I don't think they are perceived as a main actor, which basically doesn't let the people, look at them as a main threat. And then, there's a big difference between a foreign occupier and colonizer and a weakened semi-authority that's, whose authorities are shrinking by the days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Let me see if there's other questions. Someone wanted to ask if there's any real support from churches in Europe or North America. And I would add to that what you would like to see the church do more. I know you said action, but I know Kairos Palestine, I know there's Mazen actually put the details on the Kairos Palestine. So I just want to hear your thoughts on what churches can do more and people of faith.
Yes. So again, churches act within communities, and for us, this is a great advantage, because when we act as individuals, there's little we can do. When we act as states, it takes a lot to mobilize states. But communities are actually the perfect formula for taking immediate action. What churches can do is make sure their church and congregation is acting in line with international law and legality, not investing in Israeli businesses inside the settlements, not, making sure that these settlements do not profit off Palestinian land, and they have no hand in that. They're not, giving money. And some churches have been boycotting and divesting and doing amazing work. And then educate themselves as churches towards what's going on with Palestinians, with Palestinian Christians, the impact of the Israeli policies on the first congregation of Christianity in the world, and the detrimental impacts on imagining what a Palestine is without its first Christians, Palestine that brought Christianity to the world. So really getting educated about what's going on, being in touch with Palestinian Christians, and then giving voice to Palestinian Christians in their churches and within their own decision makers. In one of the webinars that I was featured in, I again, it's time for action. I was not shy. I told the faith-based community not to pray for us. We don't need prayers if they're not accompanied by strategic action within the church. What does strategic action look like? It does look like who will do what to, influence decisions, and with what budget. Who's responsible for what? What is the budget allocated for that? We see the churches, acting for gender justice. It's important, environmental justice, what have you, and they have very specific programs. But when it comes to the Palestinian cause, we have statements, we have prayers. That's the last thing we need. It's not the time for that. It is time for action. When you want to take action, just think, how am I influencing now the decision makers in my country to basically change their policy and respect their legal obligations, respect international law, make sure they're not taking part, complicit, willingly or unwillingly, in a genocide, in the annexation. And also we issued a very important report before the genocide in Gaza and before October the 7th on, religious tourism and how harmful it is to Palestinians and Palestinian Christians. And we made a lot of recommendations to the church, how they need to be aware of the pilgrimage they're taking in, be aware of the practices, not, do no harm, because many of them are quite harmful to Palestinians and to Palestinian Christians. And the report is available and online, and I encourage any first-based communities to read it. And then finally, I encourage the churches to not to use the shy diplomacy, When this is over and the time of reckoning will come, we will ask our friends, what were you doing? We don't want to hear we were praying. Thank you. But were you acting? Were you standing in actual solidarity? Because solidarity is a verb. What actions were you taking? How were you mobilizing? Were you giving the platform to Palestinian voices and Palestinian Christian voices? So it's hard to outline every single action that every church and individual member in a church can take. Every one of us has their professional networks, personal skills that they can do, to influence them, to contribute one way or another to this cause. But, these are the general outlines, if you want.
Thank you, Dalia. One question, so there's a bunch of other questions, but I'll try to minimize my personal question I wanted to ask, is it seems like the movement for Palestine has grown exponentially, part of it because of Gaza. And now that there's, in many ways less killing in Gaza, does not mean the genocide has ended, but there's less killing. And I think one of the things I've noticed with this global movement and this outgrowth is that there's a big also knowledge gap, that a lot of people, when they're advocating for ceasefire. They're advocating specifically centering Gaza. And now that there's kind of less killing, a lot of them are, I think our larger movement doesn't really know where to go, I think. And they're organizing with boycotting. But I'm wondering your opinion on what the movement collectively should start focusing on, what topics. I know we talked about annexation. Is this something that we need to continue to try to communicate to our representatives? And I think you communicated it really well. So are there resources that you would recommend for us to kind of learn how to communicate it in a better way than what, mainstream media is saying? That's more on like this, law basis where it's not necessarily an ongoing process. So yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes, actually, I always say for us to do things properly, to understand things properly, and then be able to advocate for causes properly, we need to identify the root cause. And from the root cause, we can then, understand the situation better, and which will then enable us to advocate and, shape our demands better. What is the root cause of what's going on in Palestine? We are talking about multi-layered frameworks that are all true at the same time. There is a prolonged occupation, which has specifically been pronounced unlawful, to use the terminology of the International Court of Justice. But there's also apartheid, and there's also settler colonialism. And the three of them are operating together. So without really addressing inaccurate terminology what the root cause is, I don't think we can start to understand what's going on. And again, this is the 21st century. I don't think ignorance is a valid excuse anymore. It comes, maybe for those who don't know, it comes from a place of privilege, of racism. I don't know. They never had to experience these things, so they don't care about them. But there are plenty of resources that are accessible within one click for those who want to learn. We are here. We are always available and willing to contribute, to raise awareness, to raise our voices, our own narratives. Nothing is more insulting than someone talking on behalf of Palestinians. Nothing is more like, people who it's heavy on my heart to even talk about it. But in the midst of genocide, in the midst of the atrocious violations in the West Bank, we also have to educate the world, and we do that willingly. But there's nothing more dehumanizing than those who take the liberty to formulate opinions about what Palestinians should think and do when they never had to live one single day under the Israeli oppression systems anywhere, on both sides of the Green Line. Wherever you are as a Palestinian, you are experiencing at least one form of oppression and discrimination, if multi-layered. So, the resources are plentiful, but it starts with identifying the root causes of not the cycle of violence, of the spiral of violence. It has one root cause, because the cycle, it's somewhere where you're lost, you don't know where it started. The spiral, you know where it started. And, as long as it's there, things will keep spiraling.
Thank you, Dalia. You reminded me of this, the new resource that PIPD made called communicatingpalestine.org. I think in terms of terminology and language, I think it would be a good resource. I just put it in the chat for everyone. I know it's we're running out of time. So it seems like people wanted to know first where they can access the report about pilgrimage that you mentioned, other reports that are kind of coming out and that you referenced throughout your presentation, how people can access and use them.
Absolutely. So I'll just type my or our website, balasan.org. And if you go to the website, there's this section on updates where we are updating from our field work, what's going on, any specific violations or alarming trends that we want to highlight. You will find them under updates. Under reports are the longer publications on a variety of issues. You can, for the one on religious tourism, you need to scroll a bit down. It's one of the earliest reports at Balasan, but we have plenty others. If you go to the section on digital media, you have a podcast that we we prepared 10 episodes. There are also short movies, including on settler violence, on the ID system and hierarchies, on really different topics. And again, more are coming in the following, in the coming few weeks. And then there's an important appeal that I would encourage you to read. It's a bit technical. It's about how Israel is basically bringing the last remaining Palestinian Christian presence towards extinction with its policies. It's very well documented. It's also very well analyzed under international law, and it's available under updates. I'm happy to answer any questions, of course, but these are the resources that we have on our website.
Amazing. And my last question to you is just how we can support Balasan in their work and continued, reports and advocacy.
I mean, one very important way is giving voice to not only Balasan, but like Palestinian civil society in your respective countries and within your spaces, putting them in contact with decision makers, exposing your public to our work. That's very, very important, especially important nowadays because, the Palestinian civil society is at really the front lines of, again, the Palestinian Authority is a bit sidelined, and the Palestinian civil society is really fulfilling a very important gap and the front line of countering such atrocious violations. And another way, of course, is the support, the financial support. It is also important. Unfortunately, as important as our work is, especially in this atmosphere of increasing violations, we are dealing with donors who are, shifting away from Palestinian advocacy, even rights-based, towards more humanitarian, which is very important and needed. But also, human rights work is primordial. It cannot be sidelined, especially nowadays.
Thank you, Dalia. I see, Mazen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, before I saw one of the questions, am I related to Dr. Mazen? Yes, my father is his cousin. So we are second cousins.
Thank you. I just want to add to your answer, Dalia, about the churches. I want to put a plug for three actually, groups that work with the churches successfully. One is the group that's hosting this event, Sabil. They do remarkable work, and everybody should promote Sabil and work to extend that Sabil has done through the conferences, through the outreach, through events like this event, to reach to a lot of people. So Sabil is a big group. They have an annual conference, so please attend it, please join it. The other group that does amazing work with the churches is Kairos Palestine, and I put the link for their website in the chat room. And also they have a conference in the middle of November. If you happen to be in Bethlehem, you can join this conference on the 16th anniversary of the Kairos, hold of the Kairos document, available in many languages, and send it to all your churches. That's an amazing document. We worked hard on it to develop. So it's important to disseminate it, because just like the Kairos South Africa document that demanded the churches follow the teachings of Jesus and actually implement actions to help the disenfranchised and so on. The third group is a group that hosts Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. I'm not sure if they're having one this year or not, but Christ at the Checkpoint is an amazing conference that I spoke at a couple of times, and they do great work. And finally, I put in the chat also a link from my own website titled What You Can Do, with 76 items actions that you can follow, that you can do, everything from boycott, divestment, sanctions to media work, to lobby and so on. Two, of course, visiting the Holy Land, coming here, supporting, volunteering. Now we're in the olive picking season. There's a number of groups here picking olives. We actually have internationals coming to pick olives in our botanic garden here on Thursday. So if you're around in the West Bank or if you would like to come to help, especially in marginalized communities like Musafir Yatta and the Bedouin communities, etc., then that's certainly a way you can help. We invite you to come visit us in Palestine. This is all I wanted to add to the excellent answer that Dalia gave.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Dr. Mazen. I fully agree with everything you said. And us as Balasan, we're proud partners of all the three groups. We are always there and contributing to their work with the best we can. And I want to also say, when I said Palestinian ecologists have written about, the importance of specific areas like Al Makhrur and Kremizan, I encourage you to read Dr. Mazen's work on this. It's amazing. Bit technical for me, but we always make references to it.
Thank you, Dalia, and thank you, Mazen. Mazen will actually be present, I think, next week or pretty soon with us as a speaker. So it's good to hear him preliminarily. But again, thank you so much, Dalia, for this presentation. I hope that people are encouraged to immediately take action from your presentation and also just Balasan's work. And I'll link again Balasan's website just so that people can access and visit your website. But thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time, and we look forward to hopefully collaborating with you soon in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure. Please do not hesitate to be in touch if you have any follow-up questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's past the time, so feel free, Dalia, if you want to leave. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes to share a few actions that people can take that, this week we wanted to highlight. So if anyone wants to stay on just for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will be sharing that in the chat.
Okay, I'll excuse myself. I have to run back to my son.
Yeah. Bye,
See you
Dalia.
all. Take care.
All right, so let me stop the recording and then we can begin our action portion.